Hello, we are in chapter 4, Illusions of the Ego. We're picking up the reading under Jesus, and please forgive me for missing. I have not been well. And let's go ahead and pick up the reading. This is the text, chapter 4, section 6, 5, 6 through 8. I am teaching you to associate misery with the ego and joy with the spirit. You have taught yourself the opposite. You are still free to choose, but can you really want the rewards of the ego in the presence of the rewards of God? This is Ken Wapnick. We have to be taught that the ego is not a powerful force. Furthermore, it does not make us happy. A separate identity that brings benefits only at someone's expense can never make us happy and be a source of peace. Again, learning this requires great effort because we have so strongly identified with the special self, which inevitably leads to perceiving the world as our enemy. This is the heart of the special relationship, the belief that others are trying to steal back what we secretly believe we stole from them, necessitating our constant vigilance. Peace, then, is impossible as long as we cherish this self. We need a teacher to show us how miserable this thought system of specialness makes us feel, how painful it is to think only of ourselves, and how we harm ourselves by condemning others. Because the ego's thought system has to be exposed for the lie it is, Jesus teaches us to associate choosing his love with joy and choosing the ego's guilt with pain. Looking at the ego. A second aspect of Jesus' teaching finds its first important statement in this chapter and is one of the most important themes in the text, looking at the ego. We have considered this briefly already and will return to it again and again. This theme also helps us understand the meaning of a relationship with Jesus. Its purpose is not to have him solve our problems in the world. He just showed us this does not work, but rather help us shift the mind's identification, recognizing that choosing the ego is punishment while deciding for the Holy Spirit is joy. This shift comes only when we can look at the mind's purpose for choosing the ego and the unfortunate result when we do so. When we look at the ego, the heart of forgiveness allows us to understand our mistake and correct it. We begin with perhaps the most fundamental question of all, asked by Bill while Helen was scribing the course. How could we have made the ego? This is Jesus' answer incorporated in the text. This is chapter 4, 2, 1, 1 through 3. It is reasonable to ask how the mind could ever have made the ego. In fact, it is the best question you could ask. There is, however, no point in giving an answer in terms of the past because the past does not matter, and history would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. The answer is an eminently practical one. Why ask how and why something happened in the past when we are still choosing it in the present? Incidentally, a perhaps more satisfying answer is given in the clarification of terms, where Jesus explains that the question is actually a statement disguised as an interrogative. In other words, the questioner is really stating that the ego is real and now wants an answer that would support the original premise. The true answer comes in recognition that the ego is inherently unreal and therefore its origins cannot be explained. Because Jesus continues to emphasize our present choice for the ego and eschewing of truth, we should not be surprised by the fact of the ego. Text, chapter 4, 2, 3, 1 through 5. Your own state of mind is a good example of how the ego was made. When you threw knowledge away, it was as if you never had it. This is so apparent that one need only recognize it to see that it does happen. If this occurs in the present, why is it so surprising that it should occur in the past? Why is it surprising that it occurred in the past? Surprise is a reasonable response to the unfamiliar, though hardly to something that occurs with such persistence. This statement reflects the Course's non-linear view of time. The original, i.e. ontological embrace of the ego is ongoing and is seen in our everyday choices for the ego. These choices are but shadowy fragments of the choice we made as one son and continue to make. Our love for the ego's gift of a separated identity is what motivates us to hold on to what we made, as we now read chapter 4, 2, 4, 1 through 3, and 5. Think of the love of animals for their offspring and the need they feel to protect them. That is because they regard them as part of themselves. No one dismisses something he considers part of himself. Your reactions to the self you made are not surprising. You project onto the ego the decision to separate, and this conflicts with the love you feel for the ego because you made it. This is Ken. Since the ego comes from us, made in the image and likeness of our separation, we embrace it as we embrace ourselves, a love that will not change until we change our image or what we believe we are. Section 2, 4, 7 through 11. The question is not how you respond to the ego, but what you believe you are. Belief is an ego function, and as long as your origin is open to belief, you are regarding it from an ego viewpoint. When teaching is no longer necessary, you will merely know God. Belief that there is another way of perceiving is the loftiest idea of which ego thinking is capable. That is because it contains a hint of recognition that the ego is not the self. This again is the crux of the matter, since the ego is a belief of the decision-making mind, not a fact. Our responses to it are irrelevant. When we can be induced by Jesus' technique of positive reinforcement to reject the ego, our identification will shift from the wrong-minded ego self to the right-minded self of forgiveness, and ultimately to the true self of Christ. To state it another way, we will acknowledge that the ego is the decision-maker's dream and we can choose a happier one. Thus, Jesus teaches us, you dream of a separated ego and believe in a world that rests upon it. And I'm going to stop there, and I will reread this section tomorrow, this sentence from the text, and I will have the graph up as well. Thank you so much for joining with me. I apologize for missing. I've been believing in separation a little too much. I love you. Have a beautiful day. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.